Good evening. Tonight, a seismic shift in North American trade is sending shockwaves through the American heartland. Mexico, the largest customer for U.S. dairy, has abruptly halted all imports of American milk and milk products. This move, effective immediately, freezes a $3.2 billion trade relationship. Mexico's government cites sanitary concerns, but many see a political motive amid tense trade negotiations. For thousands of American dairy farmers, this is a catastrophe, threatening livelihoods and the stability of rural communities. Tankers full of milk, once bound for Mexico, now have nowhere to go, creating a domestic oversupply and plummeting prices. The U.S. Dairy Export Council calls the move devastating, but a quick resolution seems unlikely. Meanwhile, in Canada, especially Ontario, dairy producers see a major opportunity. With Mexico scrambling for new suppliers, Canadian exporters are ready to fill the void. The dairy farmers of Ontario have already expressed their readiness to step up. This disruption could redraw the continent's dairy trade map overnight, creating new winners and losers. The long-term consequences are still unfolding, but the immediate fallout is a stark reminder of the risks in global trade. As U.S. farmers watch their primary revenue stream evaporate, the stability of countless rural communities now hangs in the balance. To grasp the gravity of Mexico's decision, consider the scale of U.S. dairy exports. Over the past 2 decades, the American dairy industry has become a global powerhouse. Today, nearly 1 in 6 gallons of U.S. milk is exported, about 18% of total production. These exports are a pillar of the industry's economic health, not just a bonus. In 2024, U.S. dairy exports hit a record $9.5 billion, supporting jobs from farms to ports. The U.S. Dairy Export Council has been key in building these international relationships. Exporting prevents chronic oversupply and keeps farmer incomes afloat. The product mix is diverse: high-value cheeses, butter, milk powders, and whey proteins. These ingredients are essential for food manufacturing worldwide, from infant formula to sports nutrition. The U.S. is deeply integrated into the global supply chain, but this also means disruptions have far-reaching consequences. Dairy exports support over 100,000 American jobs and contribute tens of billions to the economy. The halt in trade with Mexico isn't just a dairy issue, it's a national economic threat. The prosperity of entire communities now depends on restoring this vital export link. Mexico isn't just another customer, it's the U.S. dairy industry's most important partner. In 2024, exports to Mexico were valued at $2.47 billion, over a quarter of all U.S. dairy exports. The U.S. supplies about 80% of Mexico's dairy imports, a relationship built over decades. Mexico's growing population and middle class have fueled demand for American cheese, milk powders, and whey proteins. U.S. non-fat dry milk and skim milk powder are crucial for Mexico's food processing industry. Without U.S. dairy, Mexican manufacturers face immediate supply chain disruptions. The product mix is broad. Milk powders, cheese, and whey proteins are all vital. American cheeses like mozzarella and cheddar are now staples in Mexican households and restaurants. U.S. dairy processors have invested heavily in infrastructure tailored to Mexico's needs. Mexican food companies rely on the steady supply of American ingredients. The sudden halt throws both sides into chaos. U.S. exporters lose revenue, and Mexican importers face a critical supply crisis. The economic ties are so deep that untangling them causes immense damage to both countries. This is a lose-lose scenario with no clear end in sight. The partnership extended far beyond a single commodity, touching nearly every aspect of the dairy aisle. Now that partnership is in jeopardy. As the U.S. dairy industry reels, Canada's story is very different. Ontario, Canada's largest milk-producing province, is moving quickly to fill the gap left by the U.S. governed by supply management. Ontario's dairy sector can ramp up production and redirect exports efficiently. The dairy farmers of Ontario are already in talks with Mexican buyers, offering a stable, high-quality alternative. This is a dramatic reversal. Canadian producers are now poised to capture a major share of the U.S.'s most valuable export market. For Ontario's farmers, this could mean expanded quotas, new investments, and higher revenues. The opportunity to supply Mexico could transform Ontario into a major international player. While the U.S. faces oversupply and collapsing prices, Ontario's dairy sector is looking at growth and expansion. The Mexican embargo, a disaster for American farmers, is a windfall for Canadian producers. This could fundamentally alter the balance of dairy power in North America. Canadian producers are not just defending their home turf, they're going on the offensive. The next chapter in North American dairy may be written in Ontario. The U.S. dairy export portfolio is impressively diverse. Cheese leads the way, with exports surging by 29% last year, especially American cheddar, up 143%. Demand is booming in Central America, the Caribbean, South Korea, and Japan. Butter and dairy fats are also on the rise, with butter exports up 206%, driven by record sales to Australia. Anhydrous milk fat, essential for baking, rose by 91%. However, non-fat dry milk and skim milk powder, critical for Mexico, have faced recent declines. Exports of these powders fell 16% due to tighter supply and weaker demand in Southeast Asia. The halt of exports to Mexico will turn this decline into a crisis, creating a massive surplus. Whey products, once a byproduct, are now vital for sports nutrition and infant formula, with shipments up 9%. The international performance of cheese, butter, powders, and whey highlights the complexity of the U.S. export market. Some products soar, others struggle, but all are now threatened by the loss of the industry's most important market. The sudden closure of Mexico's border puts the entire U.S. dairy export strategy at risk. The industry faces a new era of uncertainty. In global dairy trade, price is king. U.S. dairy exports have thrived on competitive pricing, often undercutting European and oceanic rivals. This price advantage has driven record sales, like the 20,000% surge in butter exports to Europe. At one point, U.S. butter was 40% cheaper than European butter, prompting massive imports despite shipping costs. Lower U.S. prices for whey products have also attracted new customers. This ability to offer high-quality products at lower cost has been a cornerstone of U.S. export strategy. But the Mexican embargo exposes the limits of price-driven success. Political barriers can close markets overnight regardless of price. The halt will create a massive domestic surplus, pushing prices even lower. While this might attract other buyers, no single market can replace Mexico's volume. The price advantage that fueled growth now threatens to become a crisis for U.S. farmers. The industry must now confront the risks of relying solely on price competitiveness. Trade is about more than just numbers. It's about relationships and resilience. The global dairy trade is shaped by a web of policies, agreements, and politics. The USMCA was meant to ensure stable, tariff-free trade among the US, Mexico, and Canada. For years, US dairy benefited from open access to Mexico. But when relations sour, trade becomes a bargaining chip. Mexico's embargo is widely seen as a negotiation tactic. Canada's supply management system, with high tariffs and quotas, limits U.S. access despite USMCA promises. U.S. exporters argue that Canadian quotas are often commercially unviable. Beyond North America, tariffs and trade disputes with countries like China have also hurt U.S. dairy. China's retaliatory tariffs have made American products less competitive. The recent butter export surge to Europe was only possible because tariffs weren't prohibitive. The Mexican embargo shows that even non-tariff barriers can instantly disrupt trade. Market access is never guaranteed, even with agreements in place. The U.S. dairy industry's fortunes are tied to the unpredictable world of international diplomacy. A market worth billions can be closed with a single decision. The halt of exports to Mexico has exposed deep vulnerabilities in the U.S. dairy industry. Heavy reliance on exports, especially to a single customer, has become a liability. The closure of one border has triggered a nationwide crisis, flooding the domestic market and collapsing prices. Farmers face unsustainable losses and processing plants sit idle. The industry's focus on efficiency left it unable to pivot quickly when stability vanished. The Mexican embargo is a wake-up call. Resilience and diversification are now essential for survival. Mexico's $3.2 billion embargo has thrown North American dairy into turmoil. U.S. farmers face a crisis, while Canadian producers, especially in Ontario, see a historic opportunity. The embargo exposes the risks of relying on a few key markets and the power of trade policy and politics. As U.S. officials scramble for a solution, Canadian exporters are moving fast to secure new deals with Mexico. If Canada captures this market, the balance of power could shift permanently. The longer the embargo lasts, the more entrenched these new trade patterns will become. American producers must now diversify and adapt under immense pressure. Canadian producers face the challenge of scaling up to meet demand. The events of the past day have reshaped the landscape. Is this a temporary disruption or the start of a permanent realignment in North American dairy?